when you look at the way we learn to walk, there's a, I mean, if we didn't have this solid ground to kind of give us something to push off against and straighten up against and move in relation to, we wouldn't learn to walk. I mean, kids wouldn't learn to walk in a swimming pool floating, right? They need the ground. And likewise, kids wouldn't learn to swim in a desert. They need the water. They need the water. They need to be able to be in a certain level of balance and certain movement so that their muscles and their nervous system differentiate how to balance and move in the water. I think we need a different kind of water and ground to learn in, because the water and ground that we're learning in right now doesn't respond at all like our nervous system needs in order to learn. And so the question for me as I move forward into all of this is, what is the kind of environment that will respond to the articulation of these meaning needs, these learning needs in the learner, the way that the ground responds to stepping, or the water to trying to swim? Because ultimately, when we talk about living in an information age, and I think that's going to be a very short-lived phrase, because this isn't about information, right? I think the issue becomes, how is it that somebody becomes a walker and a swimmer in meaning space, in the space of what's meaningful in the world? How is it that they can move through that according to their needs, according to what it is they're trying to accomplish? So how is it that they learn to do that? Well, one approach is, and this is the one we've been on for so long, is they learn this particular structure, this machine-like interface, this particular way in which they have to remember how to do this and do this and do this, which has no contact with their nervous system in order to relate to the world. And the other one is that the world and them evolve a different kind of relationship altogether, one that allows the world of knowledge and information to respond to unfold before the individual's declaration of their learning needs. And I think that, I mean, that's what, from a technology point of view, we're all about, is trying to accomplish that. So it sounds, as we go forward, it's going to sound like, well, it's multimedia. Yeah, it's multimedia. It's going to sound like a lot of things you've heard before, but here's the ground of it. It's coming right down to this point. This is what our concern is. And if we get time this afternoon, even though I'm modeling this in technology, this isn't about technology. This is about relationship processes that ultimately are something that we can start to practice person to person, classroom design, district design. It's applicable everywhere. How is it that we synchronize meaning needs is the real question. How is it that the individual's learning and meaning needs starts to be the basis from which they drive? Now, mutual learning-oriented relationships. Given what we just said about this learning needs and meaning needs being the only legitimate driver from which somebody can really learn to learn, as opposed to learn a particular mechanical structure that they're going to habituate to while they're in certain subject areas, that if we're concerned with this learning need and meaning need responsivity that I've been describing, then it says that because of the gross differences in timescape, and what I mean by that is, let's be real. I mean, the teacher can't be aware of 40 nervous systems fluctuating like this. Although we've got some ideas about that we can talk about later. That's one other technology that we're very interested in pursuing. Certainly a curriculum designer or a courseware developer who's sitting way abstractly up the stream somewhere, who's now dealing with thousands of people, right? Well, they got the problem in spades. How is it that they can really think about responding to all of that? Well, I think that all that can be done, and I want to talk about that, both in terms of how the technology can do that and how we can do that in other ways. But the point that I want to make right now is that the only way we can do that or approach doing that is if what we're providing the learner isn't just a learning environment for them. Every time we create a learning environment, as its co-equal priority, it's got to be ours. Everything about it, every word that we're using, every phrase, every picture, every soundbite, every piece of how we construct the environment that somebody else is going to learn in has to be the lens through which we learn how to learn to do it. If it doesn't have that spirit in its design, that dynamic in its design, it defaults to the old mode. Here it is. from on high, catch. So to kind of summarize the background in all this, a couple of questions. If learners can't trust their own learning, their meaning needs, as the primary compass from which they can orient themselves to learning, right? Who or what's learning? I submit habits are acquiring habits. No one's learning. This is really interesting because I've run into so many people, more industrial trainers than public education educators, who have said to me, David, you can't trust learners. You can't trust them. They don't know what they need. They have no way to you know. And to me, I mean, that becomes this question. I mean, what are we trying to do except help them learn to differentiate how to trust what they're doing? I mean, if we're not doing that, what are we doing? So how can learners learn to tune into trusting their own meaning needs without a relationship to the environment they're learning in that's responsive to them? That's responsive at the level that the meaning needs are occurring. Again, it's like the walking on the ground. I mean, they wouldn't walk in air. Right? They need the ground to come up, to move, and to balance. So how is it, given the first point, that nobody's learning unless they're differentiating those, how can they possibly do it unless the environment they're in is pushing back or allowing them to follow through with, rather than to suppress and ignore those? So, and the animation's all stuttered because of the board they got me on this computer. But so if we bring all these together, it's real simple for me that what we're about is we're moving towards a learning-oriented subjectivity through mutually learning-oriented relationships. That's a mouthful, but it's like one sentence that captures everything for me, in that there's no better aspiration for educators or for parents, I think, than to bring about this learning-oriented subjectivity in the individual. They're more and more of their basic subjective nature as they relate to this subject matter, or they relate to learning a sport, or they relate to their classmates or their friends or their brothers and sisters or whoever it may be, that the more that their nature is becoming learning-oriented because they've been allowed to differentiate how they learn. Okay, I can't think of anything that education could claim as a more important banner, because citizenship is implied in that, global, local, and health is implied in that, and success in business is implied in that. I mean, take any one of these roads and they'll take us here. And there's no way that we're going to do that except through the individual being in a matrix that we might call mutually learning-oriented. That not only are they learning, but that because of the problems we must recognize that we're going to have to overcome to bring about this kind of environment for individual learners, we've got to be looking at this project, this design of a school district, of a school, of a curriculum, as if primarily it's our learning lens to learn how to do it in very, very subtle ways. So towards a learning-oriented subjectivity through mutually learning-oriented relationships. And that's the main thing I'm interested in. And everything else is tactical. Everything else is a model. Everything else is an experiment at one level or another level of those two statements. We're starting to get ready for the technology part.